I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israeli jets reportedly hit Hezbollah targets on the Syrian-Lebanese border. Israel releases a huge and controversial medical database to the public. And football fans, you're going to love the NFL even more once we reveal how they're helping Israelis with special needs. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Unconfirmed reports coming in now say Israeli jets have just struck Hezbollah military targets along the Syria-Lebanon border. The terror group denies any airstrikes took place, and Lebanese sources say the sounds heard in the night may have been from jets breaking the sound barrier. But Arab media says Israeli jets were spotted dropping bombs on a number of positions inside Lebanon.
As per Army policy, the IDF has remained mum on confirming or denying these rumors. But airstrikes in the region would certainly fall in line with the Army's northern strategy as of late. Hezbollah forces backed with Iranian money have been mobilizing throughout the region. Although neither side is believed to be gearing up for a war necessarily, everyone is prepared at all times. Israel has taken a decisively proactive approach lately to eliminate northern threats before the danger becomes too great. To that end, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has just announced that his troops actually need more funds to properly secure the situation brewing in Syria and Lebanon. That area is undoubtedly the most volatile threat facing Israel today.
Well, it looks like Hamas is gearing up for what could be a dark and bloody clash with Israeli police this weekend. The terror group is amassing thousands along the Gaza border ahead of a protest set for this weekend, which happens to collide with the eve of Passover. Hamas has just conducted a live-fire military drill that was so big it actually set off Israel's Iron Dome.
The unprecedented size of the drill signals that Hamas is gearing up for very serious violence this weekend. Soldiers from the group's military wing could be seen practicing anti-tank maneuvers and testing out at least one rocket by firing it into the sea. The amount of gunfire was massive enough that it triggered alarms all over Israel's southern border, activating the Iron Dome defense system, and even launched defense rockets into the sky. Hamas says its protest this weekend, which commemorates the day in 1976 that Israel expropriated land in the Galilee, is merely a peaceful sit-in. But by conducting its first ever live fire drill in the Strip and Israel beefing up its defense, it's obvious that neither side really believes those words.
Well, Israel's about to celebrate its 70th anniversary since gaining independence, and to commemorate the occasion, Israeli President Reuven Rivlin and Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked have announced a major deal that would pardon an untold number of convicts under specific circumstances. Here with more on the 70 outline is attorney and expert in criminal law, Orit Chayun. Thanks for joining us. All right, so who would be eligible for pardon under this outline?
Well, the President Rivlin said that he will use widely his authority to pardon, partially pardon or full pardon for the 17th anniversary for Israel.
Yeah, and who would be eligible?
The people who will be eligible for this pardon divided to three groups. First, of course, it's prisoners. The second group is people who cannot pay the penalty for the state because they can't afford it. Okay. And the third group of people is people who has a criminal record and would like to erase it and to have a clean sheet, especially soldiers and people who serve the country in one way or another.
Why do you think that this deal is being made right now?
I think from two reasons. First of all, 70 years, it's something which the country would like to give something to its citizens, and freedom is a very, very precious gift. Right. And the other reason is that we're all familiar with the High Court decision that the prisoners really suffer from very, very harsh conditions in the prisons. And it will be ease for also for them to have their freedom, especially prisoners that suffers from health or handicapped, right. And also prisoners who are aged. over 70 years old.
Is this common? Has this happened in the past? So there's been some type of massive pardon, or?
I think something similar was on the 50 years of Israel.
Interesting. Are there already names on the list yet, or there's not?
It's not going to have for everybody, because the first they will have to ask for the Ministry of Justice to make sure that the public safety will be kept. And one interesting thing is that one group of people who will be eligible for this is a group of people who suffered from abuse from their from their crime victims. And it's a very, very special and unique category, and a new one.
Well, this is obviously, a category of criminals that have been widely represented in the media over the past year or two. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, well, there is positive news specifically for the former residents of the Amona settlement. The first 25 families of those evacuated from the outpost last year will be entering their new homes today in Amichai. The remaining 17 families are slated to make the move next month, over or after the Passover holidays. And ILTV's Aaron Porras joins us with more.
Thank you, Natasha. And I'll start off by saying that while it's good news for the former Amona residents, it's very threatening news for West Bank Palestinians.
Of course. Well, what is the problem with the new Amichai settlement?
So the Amona settlement was ordered to be demolished because it was sitting on private Palestinian lands. That was an Israeli court order. But the Amichai settlement is essentially facing the exact same accusations for at least a third of the property that it sits on top of. Yeah. Add to that the regulations bill, which was passed a little last year, and you can see that it puts a lot of Palestinians in a very precarious situation.
Well, and it doesn't seem like there's much that can be done to fight this transfer. Have there been abuses since the passing of this regulations law? I mean,
there have been, of course, some alleged abuses with the regulations bill. Of course, the regulations bill essentially allows the state of Israel to expropriate any lands that illegal outposts have been settled on, and just this year, nearly 2,800 units have been built. 78% nearly on lands that would either need to be returned in a future peace deal, and nearly 10% just completely illegally and without Israel's backing. So you're seeing a lot of land that could potentially be taken. It's worrying for Palestinians.
How many units are normally built in the West Bank annually? And expansion seems to be almost normal nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, expansion is a normal thing for any growing population, but just this past year, again, I mentioned nearly 2,800 units were being approved in the past year in the West Bank. Well, that's a 17% raise over the average over the last decade. Yeah. So that's quite a bit. And again, nearly 8% of that is unauthorized.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us with more information about this. All right, Prime Minister Netanyahu has just announced a controversial new plan to compile the medical history of every single Israeli citizen into one massive digital database. The proposal has just been given the go-ahead with nearly $1 billion shekels behind it, and the government hopes such a database will give Israel a bigger cut of the medical market worldwide.
Israel's 4 major medical insurers already have digital databases of their patients' medical histories, so the first step would be to merge these lists into a single system. Netanyahu says that citizens will only be part of the database if they give their unconditional consent, and that security measures will be in place to make sure that this data doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Critics, however, warn that such a database poses massive risks to both privacy and patients' health. By analyzing the data in such a system, medical companies would indeed be inclined to invest in Israeli firms, but could also potentially use that data against patients by inflating the cost of certain drugs after realizing their popularity. This is exactly the same exploitment that many say ruined the American healthcare system, ultimately profiting only the rich by keeping affordable medical treatment out of reach to the rest. The scandal surrounding Cambridge Analytica's alleged breach of nearly 50 million Facebook users' personal data is also seen as a red warning to this plan. Israel recently opened an investigation to see if the data firm may have used Israeli intel to help sway the 2016 election.
One of the biggest social debates within Israeli society is the one between Mizrahi Jews who originally immigrated from African and Arabic countries and Ashkenazi Jews who descend from European families. Many Mizrahi Jews say they've been unfairly discriminated against ever since the birth of the Jewish state in 1948, and it looks like the government is mobilizing to give some answers in this debate. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the details.
Thanks, Natasha. Well, this is kind of a bit of surprise here. Prime Minister Netanyahu has just officially announced that decades of previously unseen documents dating all the way back to the 50s are about to be opened to the public for the first time. We're talking police records, the National Archives, immigration papers, just a ton of stuff. And as you said, this is all concerning that big public debate over alleged Mizrahi persecution from Ashkenazim. And that's a story as old as the country itself, really.
It certainly is. And let's talk about that. I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down in a history lesson here, but when Jewish immigration opened in the wake of World War II, many of the Ashkenazim who arrived came from Europe with college degrees and sometimes even wealth, whereas Mizrahim Jews came from less developed Arab-majority countries, meaning they didn't speak Western languages and didn't always have access to that same level of education or even finances. Now, of course, these are generalizations, but more or less this is what Israel looked like in the early days.
Sure, and we are generalizing here, but I will say this. Take a look at that inequality versus who was chosen to lead the country in the 40s and 50s. That's Herzl, Ben-Gurion, Kaplan, they were all Ashkenazim. And let's be honest, whether that was for the best in 48 or not, that trend has largely continued until today. I mean, the Mizrahi community here, they do backflips anytime anyone with Moroccan or Iraqi roots gets elected to a major office because, frankly, it just doesn't really happen that much.
Yeah, and there have been a handful of Mizrahi chiefs, of course, in the IDF, Knesset members, ministers, etc.
Right,
but certainly not as many as Ashkenazi. Another thing the Mizrahi community has always charged is blatant discrimination from the state too, beginning way back in the 50s. Some families say they were essentially second-class citizens.
Right. Well, that brings us to today, really.
Yeah.
Now, when he announced this plan to open these archives to the public and essentially invite, an investigation into those early years, Netanyahu specifically mentioned an Israeli TV documentary that has just aired. That film was called The Ancestral Sin. And the filmmakers apparently managed to obtain a lot of classified reports documenting systemic racism back in that time. So on one hand, some say, this could just be damage control for more info to come. On the other hand, many Mizrahim are saying it's frankly just about time.
Yeah, and it sounds just like the Yemenite children's affair, which is something else that we've covered substantially. And recently, the court screened a law to allow the graves of allegedly dead Yemenite infants to be opened in an effort to figure out whether there was a conspiracy to kidnap babies from Mizrahi families and then give them to Ashkenazi families.
Right. Well, I think when those graves get opened and examined, it'll definitely be a major story. And the same goes for this. I know a lot of people here are very anxious to see what's waiting in these files.
They are. Well, keep us posted. Thanks, Brett.
Sure.
All right, good news this week. Israel has just begun to clear thousands of mines from the Qasr al-Yahud baptism site on the Jordan River. This is a big deal because once all of the dangerous remnants of war are removed from the area, Christian tourists will be able to safely visit the holy site.
Qasr al-Yahud is believed to be the spot on the Jordan River where Jesus was baptized. The area contains 7 churches, each belonging to a different denomination of Christianity. But sadly, for decades, these bullet-pocked churches have remained abandoned because some are booby-trapped by dangerous landmines. It's estimated that around 2,600 anti-tank and 1,200 anti-personnel mines are buried at the site, along with unknown booby traps and explosive devices. Israel mined the area following the 1967 Six-Day War, all in a bid to prevent Jordanian and Palestinian fighters from infiltrating and attacking Israel. Now Israel has vowed to demine the area along with the UK-based group Halo Trust, which clears landmines across the world. It will cost about $4 million to completely demine the area, but the economic benefits of clearing the area are vast. Christian tourism is increasing at a steady rate here in Israel. In fact, in 2016, over 1.5 million Christian tourists came to the holy country, making up 53% of all incoming tourists. 40% say their trip was a pilgrimage, so we can be certain that once Qasr al-Yahud is safe, it will be receiving a lot more visitors.
All right, though Israel is home to a lot of dog lovers, 1 in 17 people in Tel Aviv have dogs, there are still many fluffy friends that need to be adopted. It's often harder for older dogs to find a home, and that's where the hofshy elderly dog shelter comes in. Here in the studio with Hofshy's amazing story is chairman and founder Kobe Brook. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha.
All right, so this is a passion of mine, dogs. All right, so tell us about your organization. How did it start?
20 years ago, I left the media and went to my grandfather's home in Kfar Yeshua and started to build a home for elderly dogs. I built it all the years. I work silently, build it all alone. And nowadays we have about 50 dogs already with us. Most of them are more than 12.
And you're looking for homes for them, yeah?
It's very hard to find a home for elderly dog, and most of them will end their life with us.
Yeah.
Most of them can't live at home. Or they start urinate, or they have difficulty
so you need an outdoor space for...
Yeah, they have to have a special home, a special environment.
Well, I can't imagine what you go through on a daily basis, because I know how attached I am to my dogs. If I were to go through losing, dogs like this, I don't know what I do, which is probably one of the reasons people are more scared of adopting dogs that are older.
Unfortunately, it's a part of our regular life there.
Yeah. Where do you get these dogs? Where do they come from?
They have owners. Most of the owners are interested in the dogs. I'm sending them WhatsApp video. They're coming to visit the dog, even.
Really?
But the dogs can't live at home.
Okay, I understand.
All the owners are older and can't take care of the dogs. Yeah. So they need the places.
So how do you fund this?
20 years ago, we started this is my daughter, Free, and Pashoshit, the dog with the hair.
Yeah.
And we work silently, but I had a dream all those years to build treatment room for the dogs.
Yeah.
Nowadays we do it on the terrace, on the grass. We need a room for that we can take a dog and take care of him
and allow them to enjoy their last year.
In a clean environment. That's why I started 2 weeks ago a Head Start campaign to raise money to build a treatment room for those.
Well, this is beautiful. Dogs. I mean, hopefully there are viewers who are, interested in donating. Again, most of these dogs are not up for adoption, right?
Most of them are not.
Okay, but there are a couple. There are some, or not so much. Okay.
There are some young even. Every dog has his own life story.
Yeah.
And
so people should come and visit. I would love to come and visit and see this.
Most welcome.
I think it's a really big, beautiful mitzvah that you're doing, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Just Google us, treatment room for elderly dogs.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, 30 of the NFL's top football players have just made a trip right here to the Holy Land for a very special reason. The players spent the day in Jerusalem's Shalva National Center to support, get to know, and yes, pass around the ball with Israelis of all ages who have disabilities.
Shalva is one of the country's biggest and longest-serving centers for disabled kids and adults. But the smiles on kids' faces upon meeting a real-life NFL star was probably a day no one will ever forget. The delegation of footballers included retired and current players, and even a few Super Bowl winners. Along for the amazing visit was Jacksonville Jaguars safety Don Carey, Baltimore Ravens tackle Michael Pierce, Steelers defensive end Tyson Alalu, and Lions safety Miles Killebrew, to name a few. The NFL delegation took a tour of Shalva's amazing facilities and got to sit down one-on-one with some truly amazing kids. Shalva has been servicing this community for nearly 28 years now. On top of being an all-inclusive live-in campus for nearly 2,000 kids a week, it also offers cutting-edge rehabilitation and education centers, as well as some of the country's top disability research. Last but not least, Shalva's facilities are 100% free to anyone who meets the criteria. I'd say that scores more points than a touchdown, a field goal, and a safety all at once.
Well, whether you keep kosher on Passover or not, if you find yourself coming to an Israeli hospital this Pesach, which hopefully you won't be, you will be keeping Passover by law. Israel's High Court has just ruled that in order for hospitals to properly serve all members of Israeli society, absolutely no leavened product shall enter the premises for the full duration of the holiday.
The new ruling upholds a pre-existing law on religious kosher laws over Passover. In the past, that law hasn't always been upheld to the letter, but that all changes starting sundown this Friday. Security guards at public hospitals across the country will now be looking for more than just weapons when they check you at the door, because if they find anything non-kosher for Passover, I'm talking cookies, loaves of bread, breakfast cereal, they can now confiscate the grub, or make you leave the premises to eat it elsewhere. The court's ruling says that the ban is lawful because hospitals are too swamped to properly separate meat and milk dishes, which is a problem for Orthodox patients since those dishes get distributed across the hospital. But critics in the Knesset and in the Reform community argue the precedent is a dangerous one because it allegedly mandates religious practices unfairly on those who don't observe. That includes non-Orthodox Jews as well as millions of Christians and Muslims who currently live in Israel. One lawmaker sums up his outrage by saying, "What democratic state tells people what to eat?" Either way, there's one thing the law can't make anyone do. Just because I eat matzah, it doesn't mean I think it's actually tasty.
Ever heard of the Zohar House? This cultural center was first opened in the 1950s by the Zionist Organization of America, and as one of Tel Aviv's first gathering spaces, the center has certainly had an impact. While the history behind this building may be a bit old, it's far from faded. And joining me now with all of the amazing new things to come from Zohar House is Zohar House CEO Amichai Lowenstein. All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good
All right,
evening.
so tell us about what Zohar House is.
Well, as you said, the Zohar House was built by the Organization of America in the beginning of the 1950s. And since then, it hosted lots of events and cultural events. And many leaders and celebrities from all over the world came
Very
to
cool.
see the place and talk in the place, such as Eleanor Roosevelt, such as the actors, famous actors, Kirk Douglas, Danny Kaye.
Interesting. And to this day, we're seeing people like that come and visit the Zohar House?
And in the beginning of the 2000s, the Zohar House was bought by the Jewish-American entrepreneur, Mr. Eli Tahari, which is
Okay.
also a very famous fashion designer, a worldwide fashion designer.
Wow.
And since then, the Zohar actually invested a lot in bringing more events to the place, in rebranding the place.
What are some of the events? Give us some examples.
So first of all, we have every night theaters from all Israel coming to perform.
Oh, very cool.
And stand-up comedians and singers from all over Israel.
Yeah.
Beside that, we have lots of business events, cultural events, seminar courses, lecture, and
Is there an
many
event coming up that we should be keeping our eye out for?
Actually, there's something I'm very passionate about is our galleries. We have in the first floor the Dvorah Fisher Gallery for the last 10 years with
Wow.
the exhibition changing every couple of months. And now we're opening the new gallery in the second floor with the modern art artists. And I'm inviting everybody to come and see and watch and explore the art.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Zohar, like we said earlier, has been kind of a staple of Tel Aviv culture. So for those of you who are interested in seeing some theater, some art, this is a place to go. Thank you so much for joining us, Amichai.
Thank you.
Israel's beloved former president and Prime Minister Shimon Peres passed away in September of 2016, leaving behind a legacy that can never be forgotten. And now it looks like a new film about his life is slated to premiere in June, but guess who's narrating it? None other than the world-famous actor George Clooney himself. The film is called Never Stop Dreaming, The Life and Legacy of Shimon Peres, and it's being produced by Moriah Films, a division of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Clooney apparently already recorded his narration several weeks ago. The film is being directed by Richard Trank, who managed to record 50 hours of interviews with the Israeli leader just months before his death. The former U.S. presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush are also supposedly making appearances in the film, along with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, singer Barbara Streisand, and the current Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Peres served in the Israeli government for 70 years in a wide variety of positions, from prime minister to president to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Defense, and Finance. And at the time of his retirement in 2014, he was the world's oldest head of state and, sadly, the last link to Israel's founding generation. This film about his life is scheduled to first air at the Kennedy Center in Washington on June 13th. And I hope I can manage to watch it here from Israel. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We're all special in our own way, so today's word is miuchad, which means special in Hebrew. Some people just make the world miuchad by being in it, but being miuchad comes in lots of different forms. You can be miuchedet, or special for a woman, for how generous you are. You can also be miuchad for how good you are at math. And you can just be miuchad for being you. Remember, everyone has something miuchad that makes them stand out. And if you think you aren't miuchad enough, don't worry, there's definitely somebody out there who thinks you are. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a low of about 57 or 14 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect mostly sunny skies, though with little change in temperature. The high should be around 78 or 26 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.49 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.